Classic Star Wars.
Just so everybody knows. The first- Look at that. We're still hidden. There we are. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to Streaming Star Wars Force Connect on Friday nights. I'm your host, Pete Fletzer, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend, Nick Milkey. We're waiting for Chris. He's dealing with Philadelphia traffic this evening, but hey, we're just glad to be here with you. Nick, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. And I have to say, I'm still digging the intro song. As I sit here with a drum set just out of my line of sight, I catch myself, playing a little beat in the chair while the song's going. But maybe my favorite part is actually just the dot matrix printer that wraps it up at the end.
Yes.
Because nothing ages, the hosts of this show and sometimes our guests more than things like dot matrix printer sounds.
If you can identify that sound,
exactly,
you are the target audience for this
That's right.
show.
This becomes one of those, yeah. It becomes what Brian said right here: dot matrix and vinyl. Woo, hitting all the highlights.
Exactly.
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for our guest tonight. We've got some fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
and just another great Friday.
Yeah, we sure do. We have joining us a little bit later will be Clayton Sandell. Clayton recently. He's been on Force Connect. He's been on both our shows. He's a friend of the Star Wars community. He's currently he's most recently with and still is with Scripps and formerly Newsly. He's a newsman. He's a major Star Wars fan. When he was at ABC News, he of course did Force of Sound and covered all the other a lot of the other Star Wars things that were happening at that time. But he's just a great friend of the community, and we're excited to have him because we got a couple of things to talk about tonight. First thing we want to do is we're going to hit the Bad Batch, which was just episode 3. Everybody's talking about it, as they should be.
Yep.
And we want to dig in a little to the documentaries and what they mean to Star Wars and Star Wars fans, and why behind the scenes is got that tight connection to everything Star Wars. So,
absolutely.
But before we get started, Nick, I do have to do the housekeeping that we do every time. We need you to, if you're hanging out with us, make sure to follow Streaming Star Wars on all your social media. Follow us at Streaming SW on TikTok and Twitter, and on Instagram we're Streaming Star Wars. We're trying to get those names taken care of. And of course our website, streamingstarwars.com. There you can get all of our old episodes. You can get information about the show. You can find out about our Patreon program if you'd like to support us. And we also have links to our merch. And by the way, all of our merch, I just saw before we came on, Nick, is all 35% off right now. So
it's on sale.
If you're thinking about getting some of our cool new logo shirts or any of our shill t-shirts or anything, there.
I'm doing my best to Vanna White this bad boy. We've got stickers with all the new logos in. Rocking my Force Connect shirt tonight. I am nothing if not a company man. So
excellent. And we are also going to be taking your calls all throughout the night. As in the past, we had just taken them in the second half of the show. If we're talking about something and you want to jump on in, look for the link. We're going to put it up in the chat in just a second. But before we get to our guest, Nick, why don't you bring us would you maybe do a nice little toast for us as we do every Friday night?
I would be honored to bring a toast, and it's one of my favorite parts of the week. It's one of my favorite parts of the show, getting to think about something during the week that is relevant to what we do here, our Star Wars circles, all the other parts of the world. And I have to say, my toast tonight is going to go out to the maestro himself, John Williams. I don't know if anybody else caught the article that I saw yesterday afternoon, but he was with Steven Spielberg at an event. They were talking about the Fabelmans. He scored the Fabelmans. And, we've heard for a while now that Indy was going to be it for him. He was going to be done. And he said publicly on stage with Steven Spielberg that he guesses that he can't be done yet and that he's going to continue working. I think there was a story, maybe it was Steven Spielberg's dad, worked for the Shoah Foundation until he was like 100 years old. And so John Williams said, well, I've got at least another 10 years. I've got to keep up. And he also kind of made it that thing of like, when Steven calls, I can't tell him no. Right. And so Spielberg, of course, responded, well, crap, I've got to figure out what my next project is. So I have to say, as a child of John Williams and everything he has scored my entire life,
yeah,
I could not be more thrilled that the maestro is going to keep producing this wonderful music that speaks to our souls, that speaks to our fandoms. So, along with all of our friends that are watching in the chat tonight, I want to raise our glass to the maestro himself, John Williams. Cheers and happy Star Wars.
Happy Star Wars. Oh, man, that's some good stuff. That's some good stuff. Well, we are going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump in with our guest, Clayton Sandell, and we're going to start talking about The Bad Batch.
Just a quick jaunt through hyperspace, and we're back again.
We are. Well, so we are honored and privileged, as I said at the top, to be joined by friend of the fandom, friend of the show, a guy who he's, you get the opportunity to watch Star Wars through the eyes of somebody who is getting to see behind the scenes and getting to cover it. And it turns out he's just as nice and friendly as all the fans you meet. I'm honored and privileged to bring in our friend, Clayton Sandell.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I was toasting with my peach tea Snapple.
It totally counts.
Cheers. Yeah.
Cheers.
Excellent. How you guys doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How have you been? It's been a good start, I guess, right? I mean, crazy.
Busy start. Yeah. I was we were covering the big CES tech show in Vegas last week, so I was gone on the road all last week. So we just kind of hit 2023, hit the ground running, and it's been a busy couple of weeks.
It
was nice. Nice holiday. It was nice break during the holidays, though. I hope you guys had a nice bit of time off.
Sure did.
Had a lovely holiday, and I have to say, and I have to bring this up because of, again, another personal corner of nerddom that I've lived in my entire life. We played tag with you a little bit back and forth over the last month or two, trying to get you on a Friday night. There's not a lot of things that people could say on a Friday night that I would be jealous of. Oh, you're not going to come be on my podcast because you're doing this other thing. But the thing that you were doing is that you were covering the rocket launch, and several times when it got scrubbed, and I
didn't think that thing was ever going to take off. Yeah,
nobody did. But the fact that it did, I mean, again, 10-year-old me is just reignited with excitement that we're back in space, that we are making these strides. And I'm sure, you grew up with the space program, like the rest of us did. It had to have been amazing to get a chance to cover that.
It really was. I loved. I was sort of an aviation geek too as a kid, and covering space or paying attention to the space program. But we were never. I grew up in Southern California, so we never saw a shuttle launch or anything like that.
Right.
I had never seen a launch until the SLS with the Artemis mission took off. We would go out and we'd go to Edwards Air Force Base and watch the shuttles land occasionally, but it was my first takeoff, so I was super excited.
That's amazing.
And of course, like really bummed when they scrubbed it a couple of times. Got a lot of hotel points sitting in Orlando.
I was going to say, you logged a lot of miles
waiting for this thing to blast off. It was great. It was great when it did. Yeah, it just it takes off, and you see the light first, of course, because we were 3 miles from the launch pad, and then the sound hits you, and when it hits you, it's just completely rattles your bones as it lifts off into the sky. So it was pretty fun. It was pretty unique. I was actually like standing there trembling, like 10 minutes after it had happened. I said to my photographer and producer Matt, I was like, "Man, I'm still like trembling after seeing this thing."
Mhm.
It's pretty
It
cool.
that's one of those things that it's on the list, and it's on, and
Yeah,
especially now that we are doing stuff again. I mean, I'm not that
yeah.
far away. I could drive down next time they do a launch, or I should. Of
Well,
course, the ifness of if it makes, is the whole thing, but still, just that's something that I want to experience at some point. Because again, I grew up obsessed with the space program. Wanted to be an astronaut until I found out you had to be good at math to be an astronaut, and that was a
yeah,
problem.
I was out. Forget it. Yeah, yeah.
So I've lived vicariously through it, and I've read, you know, all the different books I could get my hands on. One of my favorites is Moonshot, which was the book that Deke Slayton
Yeah.
wrote about,
Mhm.
the Mercury and Apollo programs and that kind of stuff. It just Earth to the Moon, Apollo 13, you name it, just get it in my face.
Well, what's so cool, really, about what's going on in the Space Coast, which I didn't even realize this until we were driving by the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center, and they keep, those like we've gone 35 days without an injury. They
Mhm.
have this counting. They have this system where they keep track of how many launches there had been, and we drove by, and there had been something like 67 launches when you count all of the SpaceX and Blue Origin and all
Yep.
the other private space companies that are
Hmm.
very busy down there. You don't realize just how busy
Absolutely.
it really is, and so there were a lot of opportunities. In fact, the first time we went down there to wait for the Artemis launch, which was ultimately scrubbed, I was on my way out to the hotel, and there was just a random SpaceX rocket that took off. In the distance, like
Just just
I didn't
another
even
day.
know they were doing this launch, and it
Yeah.
takes off, and it was just totally cool
But
in the
it's really
night.
cool. And as a resident of Alabama, I have to say I'm excited that it's back as well, because we have Redstone Arsenal, we have the Huntsville Space and Rocket Center, and so much of the original space program stuff came out of there. And for them to be, for that to still be a significant part of the program. I took my girls this summer. We went to the Rocket Center. I hadn't been in 20 years. We went and visited a friend over the weekend in Huntsville, and we took them and spent the day. And of course, I had more fun than they did. And also, literally, as you walked in the front door, they had an exhibit to space and pop culture, and so there was Star Wars and Star Trek and everything else was all right inside the front door. But they had all the listings, and they had a big interactive map of all the different parts of the Artemis, program and what states they came from, and
Wait,
it's
yeah,
amazing how it comes together.
aren't the engines from your neck of the woods?
Yes, they are.
The
That's a
shuttle,
part of what. Yeah.
refurbished shuttle engines. Yeah.
Yep. They came out of Redstone Arsenal, and again, it's phenomenal. So very cool, and thank you for indulging me in a couple of minutes actual space talk, which is a great way for us to transition into the Bad Batch, which is actual, real, important space talk. We got new Bad Batch this week, and everybody's been buzzing about it. Just my quick encapsulated thought was I watched it Wednesday morning, and for those first couple of minutes, I was like, "Why is everybody losing their mind about this?" And then we got to the last like 7 or 10 minutes, and I just sat there stunned, going,
Yep.
"Oh, this is really good," and it all kind of crystallized. What are your thoughts on this new episode, Clayton? Where did it hit for you?
I absolutely loved it. I just caught up with all three of them this week. I'd been behind and busy, but this episode for me, I think it the one. I mean, the story was great, and we can talk about all of that. But the overall thought I had after watching this episode is that this episode should finally disabuse anyone of the notion that Star Wars animation is cartoons for kids.
Right.
100%.
It,
Yep.
it is done on such a level of craftsmanship, not only the story, um, but just the technical, the look of it, but all, the tone and the scene that really stood out to me was the blaster to the face of
Yes.
Clone. I mean,
Mhm.
that was I had the same
Yeah.
sort of visceral reaction in the first episode of Andor when that
Mhm.
happened, and it's not the same tone of Star Wars that we're used to being sort of
Yeah,
geared towards.
it's funny because my reaction to the first two episodes and when they first came back, because it was our first Star Wars, of course, since Andor, and my initial response was I was glad that happy, adventurous, fun Star Wars was back. And not
Yeah.
that Andor was bad in any way, because I loved Andor. I thought it was some of the best storytelling we've ever seen in Star Wars. But it was good to get those sort of 23-minute, action-packed, just colorful, fun Star Wars. But it ended with a cold-blooded murder of a clone. This episode ends with the cold-blooded murder of a governor.
Of a governor, yeah.
Star Wars has decided they're not joking around anymore. But you know what I think is really interesting, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Clayton. Is for years we've had the Empire's bad, the Rebels are good, and there was no middle ground. I often talk about how back in 1977 the world was different. You could say, here's your bad guys, here's your good guys, and not worry about that gray. But I think there was been a bit of, some people have floated toward the Empire's cool and they're fun and they're whatever, but their uniforms are awesome, their technology is great. But I think what we've learned over the last two shows, especially the last two series, is that they're not good. They're not good people at all. They are that horrible government body that we want to make sure that we're separated from for as long as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching at 4 years old with my aunt and uncle who took me to see Star Wars in the theater. It was very easy to explain to a 4-year-old because, Darth Vader was the bad guy. He's in black. The stormtroopers are you can't see their faces. They're the bad guys. And then you had all the good guys on the other side. It was very easy to follow for a little kid. And now, I think, just storytelling has changed, society has changed, everything's changed. And so there's more of an emphasis now to really make it a place where there are lots of shades of gray. And I think it's still, Andor did this. I think this episode is, there's much more of this wrestling with the moral implications of what you're doing. So there's more exploration of that. I mean, what's good is good, and I still think is portrayed fairly clearly. What's bad is bad. But it's the exploration of these characters and what they're going through that we haven't seen in this way before. And I actually think it's pretty cool. I mean, you can't have a franchise go on this many decades and not have it evolve in some way. And so in a lot of ways, I just kind of see this as a natural progression of the storytelling style.
That's exactly right. And it's so interesting that the storytelling
disruption can mean only one thing: invasion.
There he is.
Very clever. You guys have the best graphics and openings of any show. I mean, it's great.
We win. We can shut it down. We win.
That's right. We're done. That's it.
Welcome,
Christopher, how are
Chris.
you, sir?
Everybody, doing good. Good. Clayton, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. Happy New Year. How are you?
Yeah, Happy New Year. Doing all right. Sorry it took me so long to get here, fellas. I just changed OSs, so every time I even open a JPEG, my computer's like, I don't know what to do. So
we were saving the best for last. We were building that anticipation.
That's exactly. I like that.
Just had to get him in here. So Chris, you were in the background. You heard a little bit of what Clayton had to say. Talk to us about your feelings on this episode of Bad Batch. What, I know you and I and Pete tend to avoid texting about it to save it for Friday nights. Tell me what you got.
Well, like when I try to think of outcomes of shows, they always go to like a darker place. People are like, dude, you're a downer. I'm like, yeah. So I'm always looking for like the worst thing to happen to these guys. But this episode was really in line with what I love to see in Star Wars. Like, this is the dark times. If there was ever an episode that really outside of the finale, or when Camino got destroyed, that showed you the dark times, this was it. And I know that we're getting off of Andor, so we get into the animation, we think, oh, it's going to be a little bit lighter. But man, this episode showed in animation form how oppressive the Empire is, and I really liked seeing that. And knowing now how they're going to phase out the clones, because they can't, they're not going to be able to control them as far as like their thought process and everything. So, I'm loving seeing that, and that Rex and Cody reunion going forward. But this episode was powerful in so many ways, and if this is an indicator of where this season's going, and it's only the third episode,
yeah,
all in. I mean, I was all in anyway. It's got Star Wars in the title, but
I was gonna say
all in.
Yeah, we're an easy mark when it comes to Star Wars. It's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree with you. And I love, the transitional part that you talked about, the transition into the Empire, what we get. That's what I talked a lot about last season with Bad Batch, was in those, the Cut and Sue episode, or Cut and Run, I think is what it's called. But when they go see Cut and Sue and on that planet, and you're seeing people, and this is, again, I've said this too many times, the brilliance of Lucasfilm and Star Wars and their storytelling is that before we got those episodes, we got we got Mando episode with Boba Fett where he talks about chain code, and we had heard mention of chain code, but we really didn't know what a chain code was. But then we get the episode of Bad Batch where you see the Empire forcing people to register and get a chain code, which is a government issued, identifier. And so we're getting to see those transitions of power and how they take over, and that carries over into what we see in Bad Batch. And I love the transition, even in the things, and certainly as a sucker for Ralph McQuarrie, the transition in the helmets and the armor. We're going from those old T-style clone helmets to what you're going to see become, the concept art helmets that are going to eventually become the Stormtrooper helmets that we get in, Star Wars and Empire and all that. It just, I love that. As much as we love behind the scenes, and we're going to talk about that later, the behind the scenes of how the Empire is formed in this narrative universe or galaxy is phenomenal to me.
Yeah.
Well, let's bounce a question around to all of us here. We ran a poll this morning asking if we think Crosshair is going to rejoin the Bad Batch by the end of season 2. I'll share the results. Actually, I'll share them now, and then I'll start with Clayton to get his thoughts. 33% of people say yes. 67% say he's not coming back by the end of the season. What do you think, Clayton?
What? How many think he's not coming back?
67%.
67%. Okay. I'm gonna decline to answer this question only because I've seen bits and pieces of episodes that are coming down the road. So I'm gonna lips sealed. I'm not gonna weigh in on this particular question. Would I like to see? Back? Yeah.
So while Pete and Chris answer the question, I'm just going to stare intently at your face to see what your reaction is. So we may just have to turn Clayton's camera off for a minute.
I should not skip that. All right. Sorry.
Chris, you're saying no, looks like.
No. You guys have heard where I think that it's going to happen with them. I mean, we saw it in the comics. In the Star Wars comics that you guys don't read, but it's the in the Jason Aaron run of Star Wars, the main Star Wars title. There is a Task Force 99, an Imperial group called Task Force 99 Scar Squadron, and their visage. And I say this every week, but their matches, each one of the Bad Batch, they are either going to be copied, either like they're going to be copied, so there's a more compliant Imperial Bad Batch,
sure,
or they get reconditioned and and go on full Empire, and where Crosshair doesn't have to, he's already there, good to go. So or his mind is starting to change, so maybe he has to get reconditioned too. Either way, it's going to end on a sad note because it stems from the Clone Wars, and nothing good has come out of the Clone Wars for anyone except Palpatine.
Yep.
So
Palpatine won the Clone Wars. What about you, Nick? Where are you coming in?
I definitely don't think he comes back. I think that he's set, and Jeff said it in the chat. He said Crosshair is a straight up badass. He doesn't blink. He never changes his demeanor. He's cold. He's on it. I don't think he comes back. I think the story, the tragic story may be that the Bad Batch lose their brother. They lose, that ultimate connection, the final goodbye. We got some of that at the end of last season with Camino and that kind of thing. They didn't kill him. They left him there, and he was there for 32 rotations, as we learned in this episode. But I also love the way they're playing with us and the way they're playing with that a little bit. Because like you said, Chris, that stuff we get at the end, we get Cody asking the questions, we get, ultimately Crosshair pulls the trigger, does the thing. But one of the things I loved was at the beginning of the episode when Crosshair meets up with Cody and he gets the first mission. Cody was the one that said good soldiers follow orders. And that was the thing that we got out of Crosshair all last season. He was the one from the beginning episode. And, as things started to change, and we hear that from Cody, who by the time the episode ends, Cody's AWOL. And, I love how they're playing with that. And there's so much that can be mined out of that.
Well, to me, the difference is the way Cody said it was extremely flippant. Like in the end of the Clone Wars and in the first season of Bad Batch, it was very good soldiers follow orders, and it was very it was almost like what's it? I can't think of it. Whatever. Like when Bucky this was
Winter
his
Soldier.
sort of conditioning. There you go. Thank you. I don't read comics. I forget Marvel movies. I'm a sub-level fan. But Cody was just like, yeah, good soldiers follow orders, whatever. And to me, that kind of told me that this was where he was. He's kind of changing his tune a little bit. So I'm going to say that I think he comes back and in a sacrificial way, but out of his own choice, because it's a Disney Plus show and it's still animation, and I feel like that's a good story to be able to convert him. Otherwise, he's straight up bad guy forever. So
that's where I think it ends up. So I agree with the voters, and I was one of those voters. So
Nick,
Yeah.
were you watching Clayton's facial expressions when I said Star Squadron? Because I wasn't. I kind of.
that's right. I'll give you some notes afterward.
It is interesting though that phrase, which they keep saying, the good soldiers follow orders. It just seems to be now like they're like there's something that's brewing inside that's making them repeat that phrase over and over. There's this, this moral dilemma that's starting to crop up, and that's whereas before it seemed like just more of a rote kind of thing that they would say. Now it seems when you hear it, it's in the context of they're really there's something they're really struggling with here, and that's sort of a way that they're justifying what's going on.
And
and I think it's go ahead, Pete.
Even the way the episode ended with Cody asking the question, "Are we doing the right thing?" I mean, we know he was he eventually went AWOL, but I think that was a nice illustration of exactly what you're saying, Clayton. It's like, I say this, but do I mean it? So
yeah. Well, and I think it's neat, and I've asked this question before, and again, as Chris loves to point out, I don't read the comics, so if it was covered somewhere else, Cody has always kind of been one of those missing last pieces from the prequels and from the Clone Wars, and how did that turn out? We got Rex, we got the Bad Batch, we got these other things. So to see him show up, because I didn't know if we had already known what his ultimate end would be. I don't think we do.
Yep.
And so for the fact that he gets to continue in this universe because he's such a fan favorite. I know, Pete, you've talked about Jack, and Cody's always been one of Jack's favorites.
He named his lizard Cody after Cody.
Yeah. So it's for that.
Yes,
that
we have a
almost
lizard
felt like that almost felt like for a long time very interesting and telling that a character that was that beloved kind of just fell off after a certain point. We didn't get any more, and then to get him back, I know was huge, certainly for for Jack and everybody else, especially those who are younger than me that grew up with Clone Wars and are much more along that line of thinking.
For sure. Well, I think we have a caller, Nick.
We do have a caller.
I'm going to go ahead and bring in our first caller of the night.
Go for Papa Palpatine.
You have a collect call from
Darth Vader.
I gotta take this. Hold on.
It makes me laugh every single time.
JD, what's up? How are you? Thanks for calling in.
What's going on, fellas? How's it going?
That's
JD.
Well, JD.
All right, and I have to
You guys
jump
hear me?
in very quick and say, hey, JD, we're trying something new tonight. We're running a 2-minute timer for our caller, so we make room to get everybody in. So if you see that off to the side, it's going to help us all, because I'll talk all night to you, and then
don't
nobody
panic,
else
JD.
gets to say anything.
Don't panic.
So
I'm good with that.
he's
I'm
cool.
here.
What's up, brother? How are you?
Doing good, doing good. I have to admittedly say that I'm not much of an animated, big kind of person. I have watched a lot of the episodes and key episodes of different ones, but the Bad Batch, man, it's really good, and I'm glad that they're focusing on story and keeping the animation fresh and stuff. So I'm really enjoying it. It's awesome.
What in particular?
Well, we have
did
to
you,
ask. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I was just gonna say, what in particular have you loved about the Bad Batch coming back?
I actually well, you guys kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Clone troopers to the new conscripts, that they're going to be bringing in, and they talked about that on the show, and it kind of came to light in episode 2, where the guy said he was definitely going to report Clone Force 99 didn't got killed, and he was going to report that they did not get killed. And it's like, well, they're down to, they strictly follow orders, and that we can't have that. You gotta do what I want. And it's like, so now it's like, I have guys that are always by the book, and that's why he did what he did, and that may be why they decided to go, regular conscripts instead of clones.
Yeah. Nick, you had a question.
Oh, I was just going to see where you came in on the Crosshair question. Does Crosshair come back to his brothers, or does he stay evil and bad all the way?
After this episode, no, I don't think he can. Ben Solo in Rise of Skywalker, once he had done what he had done, I really have a path for him to come back. Maybe a sacrifice situation where he sacrificed to help them get away in the end, or something to that effect. But after tonight, after this, I'll see him coming back as a good character.
For sure.
I think it'd be very difficult.
Outstanding. Well, man, it's so good to see you tonight. Thanks for calling in. Thanks for humoring us, being our first timed caller. You handled it perfectly. You landed it.
I'm proud to be the
everything
guinea
was
pig.
ready. Hey, you nailed it. And as always, you're looking dapper in your Weird Space Friends t-shirt. So thank you for your support, my friend. And we will see you again
35% off
soon.
right now on our merch store. So.
That's right.
All right.
Awesome.
Have a good night.
Thank you, JD.
See you, buddy.
See ya.
It's always good to hear from JD. JD is, I don't know, Clayton, if you had a chance to meet him in California, Anaheim. I was trying to say Alameda. I don't know why I was going there, because I've never been there, to be honest. But he's good. He's
Where
been
the
a friend of the
Whills
show
are,
for-
right?
Right, that's right.
Where the nuclear vessels.
Yes, I think this might be a good time to take a real short break. When we come back, we're going to keep this Clone Wars conversation happening. back, I just wanted to hit on a couple more things on this Bad Batch episode before we go into talking about some of the documentaries behind the scenes and this legacy for Star Wars. I wanted to get everybody's thoughts on like Nick was saying, the first X number of minutes of the show we were interested, but it came to life as soon as we ended up with clones versus battle droids again. I mean, you guys all know I'm a big battle droid fan. But what struck me after watching it a second time, as I do, was that the roles were flipped. Suddenly, it was really interesting and exciting to see the B1s as the good guys. They were really the good guys for the first time. Did you guys reflect at all on that? What was your what was your thoughts on seeing clones versus battle droids again?
That just goes to show you how amazing this universe is, and the storytelling that you can do, where ones that are villains for so long can now be heroes, and vice versa. It's so cool. So it was a little, not jarring, but it was like a little weird seeing that at first. But it's like, oh, this is pretty dope. Okay, I like this. I like this. I like what they're doing. It was like the same thing with Rebels, where at one point, the clones and the or at least Rex and the battle droids are working together against the Empire. It's amazing, all that they can do in this universe with the storytelling. It's fantastic.
Yep. Did you pick up on that right away, Clayton, or?
No, that's a really good point. I didn't realize that they were on the side of good for a minute. But I did like how they did come up again in that conversation that Cody was having with Crosshair, and when he mentions the battle droids, and he says, they're just following orders, they're just doing their thing. We have a choice, or something to that effect. So it was kind of interesting how they also brought it back into that part of the conversation, that part of the story. It was cool.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the dynamic of programming in a droid versus programming in a clone, which is another kind of deep narrative point that is subtly being hinted at and mined at, because of course the Bad Batch have had their chips removed. Cody still has his, but clearly his he's thinking for himself. His programming is not as strong as it used to be. Right. Kind of to use Pete's reference again, Captain America and Winter Soldier and Bucky, like he needs to be put back in the chair and read the Russian words again so that he can, snap back to attention. So it's interesting to also see from that dynamic what programming is what programming. Is it hardwired computer programming? Is it clone pseudo brainwashing? I guess maybe what we want to call it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Cody is not aware of even the existence of these chips, right?
Correct.
I think you're right.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
It's maybe the watch battery starting to die, and they're all starting to lose.
That's right. It's getting weak. It's like that one toy in your kid's room where the battery's starting to go dead, so it's just making random noises at 3 a.m. Yeah, it's that.
Silver's doing that now.
Yeah, Chris has got some of those. He knows what I'm talking about.
But Cody had said, we can make choices, but we'd have to deal with the consequences of those choices. That's what he was. That's one thing he was saying about the difference between them and battle droids. I took that as like some kind of. We know he's probably never going to meet up with them again, so I took that as like a semi apology to Obi-Wan, for what he had to do during Order 66.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a big moment. And again, as somebody who was not the hugest prequels fans when they were out, and as somebody who did not spend a lot of time with the Clone Wars until way later, the Obi-Wan Cody, that dynamic has always been one of those. I'm like, that's kind of a funky thing because everybody loves Obi-Wan and it seems everybody loves Cody. And to see somewhere down the line, how that if we get to see that resolution, I guess that falls in the same category as Luke talking to Ahsoka about Anakin, that we may not ever actually get to see it, but we get to, know it happened somewhere. Well, I have to tie this in, and this is going to be my transitional thought, because we can't have Clayton here and not talk about behind the scenes, because first of all, it's such a huge part of Star Wars. I'm a sucker for it. And Clayton is what I would consider the expert. I mean, he helmed and produced and put together literally not not kissing up because he's here, but Force of Sound is one of my favorite Star Wars documentaries that I've ever watched.
Oh, thank you.
But to make the connecting point, I'm a sucker for anything behind the scenes. I'm a sucker for Ralph McQuarrie art. And this show, The Bad Batch, continues to be aesthetically stunning to me.
Yeah.
The shots of Crosshair and Cody in the War Memorial, that wide shot of that memorial with the names, and the animation is gorgeous. Like, I didn't know that I'd be at a point at 45 years of age of my life talking about how gorgeous animation is, but this show is phenomenal in that sense.
It absolutely is. It is truly cinematic in the way that they block the shots, and the way that they animate the shots, and the way that the shot. You know, there's different. You can tell there's different like lens focal lengths almost in some of the shots. The shot of Crosshair walking down the hall toward the end of the episode just stood out to me. Like it just blew me away. It is so well done. It's just so well done, and
that was one of the first things that stood out to me in the first season was seeing the way these shots. You know, not only the beauty of the aesthetic qualities of the animation itself, but like you said, the way the shots are constructed. There was that scene in the episode last season where there's the chase through whatever planet they're on, where the bebopping, taxi driver that everybody used, and that scene. It was almost like it was a one shot, like it was shot through the city, and the way the camera followed the animation. Yeah, it is so well done. And again, it calls back to matte paintings and Ralph McQuarrie art, and again the stylistic way that these troopers are drawn. We get a lot of that in Rebels, but we get a lot of it in Clone Wars, and we get a lot of it in season 7 Clone Wars and Bad Batch with the helmet designs and these transitional. The way it's done. So that really feeds us into, leaning towards behind the scenes and some of that kind of good stuff.
Well, and Jeff in the chat a while ago mentioned the sounds, which are near to my heart. And how cool was it to see the droids and the droidicas come rolling in, and the shields and that whole sequence. I thought was just so well done, and it really part of what transports you into that world, and just the waves of nostalgia come back is the sound.
Yeah.
And interesting, I'll play on that too, because one of the sounds in this particular episode that drew me back, not as far, but I was surprised that I was nostalgic for it, was the battle droids. Again, I have a weird battle droid obsession, but hearing them in their Clone Wars mode, where they were more the Clone Wars animated series, where they were more humorous, they were funny, they had a sense of humor, giving each other a high five after they shoot the shuttle out of the sky. That's hilarious. But it was like that sound and those kind of lines, you realize that there's like the Star Wars pantheon of memories is now so much bigger. It's all the way back to, C-3PO panic that he killed his master by not acting quick enough with the garbage compactor, up to just a couple years ago with Clone Wars and battle droids being the comic relief.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we make this transition, I want to talk about, and this is something, like I said, we wanted to talk about this a couple weeks ago. Star Wars has a very, very rich legacy of behind the scenes content. And I have made a list. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it starts with the making of Star Wars, which came out in 1977, was on video cassette and covered, those early days. You get Classic Creatures, Return of the Jedi in 83. From Star Wars to Jedi, the making of the saga in 83. That's a big one. That's one that I grew up with.
Wore that VHS tape out.
Absolutely. Wore it out. We jump forward a little bit. Making of Episode 1, the beginning in 99. Empire of Dreams in 04. Star Wars, The Legacy revealed in 07. Plastic Galaxy, which I threw in there because if you grew up with Star Wars toys, in 2014, that's the one. Like, toys that made us as good, but Plastic Galaxy kind of started that. An underrated one, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's on Amazon. Elstree 1976 that came out in 2015 is a great one about all those behind the scenes, the bit players. One of my all-time personal favorites, Director in the Jedi from 2018, about Last Jedi and Rian Johnson. Unbelievable. Skywalker Legacy in 2020 when Rise came out. And then coming forward from there, we get into Disney stuff and we get gallery episodes, Mando 1 and 2. This year alone, we got Gallery Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, A Jedi's Return. And then, of course, the big one, kind of the marquee for this year, was Light and Magic. I have to say, I'm a sucker for this kind of content. I'll watch everything I can get. When I said this to Pete before we came on the air earlier this afternoon, we were talking. I'm at a point now where when we get a new Star Wars anything, if we don't get a behind the scenes to go with it, I'm angry. Like, where's our gallery Andor series at this point?
Yeah,
like, I
waiting
want
on
to
that
know, I want to know, but I want to throw it to you first, Clayton, because of course you've worked on Force of Sound. You've covered these things. What is it about Star Wars that lends itself to this kind of content? Because I'll be honest, I'm not interested in watching a Lord of the Rings behind the scenes documentary. I don't really care to watch a Star Trek, movie series. How did they make Star Trek? But Star Wars, I want to eat it up.
Yeah, it is. This speaks to me. I think there's almost as big a separate fandom that loves the behind the scenes stuff as they do the actual films. I still have. I got this for Christmas, 1986.
Wow.
And,
man.
I've got every book that's ever been written, ILM and behind the scenes of Star Wars and all of that. It is, I think, something that is I mean, I would argue it's completely unique in all movie franchises ever. Nobody has taken as much care to document the makings of these films as Lucasfilm has and as George did. And I think, I don't know this for sure, but you remember that one of George's first couple of jobs when he was right out of film school was working for Francis Ford Coppola, shooting behind the scenes film on Finian's Rainbow and Rain People.
Right.
So that's what he did initially. Well, he was a documentary cameraman for those films, and I don't know if that planted a seed or whether what happened. But I would like to think that his experience working on those movies as basically Francis Ford Coppola's assistant, convinced him that when they were making these films, that he needed to make sure that they were documenting the behind the scenes and how they were getting made. Because
absolutely.
And it's sort of this was a film that it's sort of a pretentious almost thing to want to suggest, right? Because nobody knew whether this movie was going to do anything or whether anybody would care that there was behind the scenes footage as they were doing this. And yet he prioritized it. And now a lot of it's just absolute, it's treasure. It's complete.
And I think you're exactly right. I think it has to come from the Coppola part of that, because again, we've heard more things than we can count about how Star Wars wasn't going to make, it wasn't going to be a thing, it wasn't going to get bought by a studio, they were over budget. Like everything we've heard, there's no part of that where you're going, yeah, this thing that's brand new and nobody understands it. I mean, we hear the thing where he talks about showing the first cut to all his friends. And Coppola and Spielberg were the only two that were like, no, I think this is great. Everybody else is like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
There's no part of making something that new and cutting edge that, like you said, as a filmmaker who's still breaking in, that has the ego to go, I should definitely document this. It only has to come from what he learned from doing that on the Coppola sets and doing that and just going, and honestly, he probably thought about it from an artist standpoint of, I may want to look back at this and figure out how I could be better. Like it could have been a self-improvement intended thing. And then when Star Wars blew up from then on, it was like, oh crap, we have to cover all of this. And, it made sense then.
And I think my sense is that there is still there's still much to be mined out of a lot of those archives. It was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that we put out. We kind of worked with Lucasfilm, and we put out some behind the scenes of outtakes of Empire Strikes Back that had never been seen before in 40 years. So I think there's still stuff out there that. I hope they have somebody like assigned to pull some of the stuff out and give it to us because
And if not, where can I apply for that job?
I just eat that stuff up. By the way, I want to say hi to Brian and Holly, who I know are watching.
Absolutely. Brian is definitely watching, and he sent love from Holly earlier in the chat. So I want to look at a couple of these because we do have some era, specific things. We of course have original trilogy behind the scenes,
right?
Some of which we got early on: Classic Creatures, Star Wars to Jedi, and that original first making of Star Wars. Like that gave us that original series, and those were, one of them was a PBS special, one of them was, one of them was put out through Lucasfilm. I think the first making of Star Wars was Lucasfilm. So you get that. Then we get into the middle part. We get into the sequels, and the Phantom Menace, the beginning, like that was a really big one. I know Pete's got some thoughts about that we want to bring into this conversation. And then this more modern era. Yep, there it is. And then we get this more modern era, not only with the sequel trilogy, which because Ryan, had the foresight to and I think honestly Ryan had the foresight to do that as much
inspired
for
by
himself
George.
Yeah. He was inspired by George, and it was a scrapbook for him because he loved Star Wars and he wanted to be able to cover, holy crap, I got to do a Star Wars.
Right.
And then it turned out to be one of the best Star Wars documentaries they've done, in my opinion. JJ, they did it with, Rise and the Skywalker Legacy, which was more of kind of encapsulating all nine. But then we also get this new era, the TV shows, and we get, all that kind of stuff coming out. Pete, why don't you jump in here and kind of throw some of your thoughts, especially as relates to the prequel trilogy?
Well, yeah, and I was thinking specifically about the awareness of the value or the draw of behind the scenes. A lot of people forget that George Lucas did something with the prequels that you can't do today. In fact, they go the extreme opposite. He had basically a webcam on the sets, and they were running video on StarWars.com while they were producing, because for two reasons. One, it was promotion, but number two, we all watched it because George knew that was one of those things that we love about Star Wars. We love the characters, we love the story, we love the lore, we love the mythology, but we also love what's going into it. And to be able to make that direct connection was very smart, very wise. And I even remember, that was part of the promotion for the special editions. Steve Sansweet, and that was when I got the opportunity to work with him. Steve was literally going from Star Trek convention to Star Trek convention with a slide deck, one of those, remember those big slides, showing behind the scenes of as they were producing the special editions. And so it's always been a part of being a fan, but also it's been a part of the promotion. And I think that's, to tie what you were saying, Nick, the era, it's no surprise that there has been a gallery for everything other than Andor, because if you haven't watched the show, you may watch the behind the scenes and go, all right, I'm going to go watch that show now.
Yep. For sure.
I think part of it is that they were also breaking new ground in the visual effects era. So there was a lot of interest in how they were doing, these effects that had never been seen before, along with the fact that they were documenting it all along the way. Just really made for a unique combination and set a foundation that I think they've been building on ever since. And I want to plug one other one that you didn't mention, which is the Galaxy That Britain Built, which is by my Whitley, which is fantastic. The reason I love it is that he was able to do something that not a lot of these documentaries can do these days, is break new ground on something that has been told and retold. And basically his approach was to go and chat with all of the British crew that helped build the sets and light the sets and create this world in England as it was being filmed. So Galaxy That Britain Built is a really good one to check out.
And it's great. And
I'm so glad you said that.
One of the things, I had the opportunity to talk to him a little bit as well, and he was one of the things he told me about it. And when you have to, unfortunately in the US it's kind of hard to find, but if you do get the opportunity to see it, the stuff that they uncover, because in Britain they were just throwing this stuff out. Like they finished with the Cantina set, dump it, throw it out. But it was Yeah, that's another really really great documentary. Um, Clayton, what do you if you could see any behind the scenes thing, if there's any piece that perhaps that they've not covered, what would you like to it's hard to say because it seems like everything has been covered, but is there anything you'd like to learn more about that you kind of hope they have sort of at the ready?
Oh, I just love, my favorite Star Wars movie is Empire Strikes Back, and we've seen a lot, obviously, from Empire. Anything, if there are any nuggets out there Empire related, I'll take it all. I mean, I'm one of these nerds that like sits in front of the TV. I've got the old J.W. Rinsler Blueprints book,
Mhm.
and I will sit there and open up the Hoth hangar set and watch the movie, and I'm like, oh, the camera must have been here, and oh, there's the
Yep.
Falcon. Like that's
It is so
that's
nerdy.
kind
Yeah.
of ridiculous.
Yeah. I want the I want the documentary about the Lee Brackett draft of the script, and the ways that changed, and some of the behind the scenes about how that all happened.
Yeah. There's I think Rinsler did a lot of work, sort of behind the scenes of the Force Awakens that has never been released yet. It just hasn't seen the light of day, so that could be interesting.
For sure.
Yeah, sometimes it just you need a little bit of cover of time for some of those
Yeah.
things. I think. Yep.
Mhm.
Chris,
I
what
agree.
about you? What's something you'd like to see more of?
Droids, the animated series,
Absolutely.
Star Wars
Oh
Droid.
yeah,
I love that. I can't help it. I love that show. I need to see more. Yeah, definitely that one. If anything, droids.
I want to get Stuart Copeland on Around the Galaxy because I want to talk to him about that theme song.
The theme
No, I
song.
want to sing it with him. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it might have been Jeff in the chat, and I agree with him. We haven't seen any behind the scenes yet of animated series, so
Yeah.
I would love to see maybe a gallery on Bad Batch.
Mhm.
For sure.
Of course, it would be
And
45 minutes of D. Bradley Baker in a booth. But
right.
I'll say this.
On computer screens.
I will say this though, and they, of course, it was done as a short because that was where it fit. But another one of my favorite behind the scenes content things is when Clone Wars season 7 came out. They did the behind the scenes of the Maul Ahsoka lightsaber battle, and it was
Mhm.
Ray Park and Lauren Mary Kim in the
Yeah.
green screen suits doing the fight so that they could record it and then animate it. And I loved that so much. And Lauren was on my show at one point, and getting to talk to her about that experience, because it really brought a different weight to the other animation. Because if you ever, when Ray Park was on Instagram, he'd do workout videos all the time. And like there were certain the jump double hit that he would do with that,
Yeah.
that
It was so
lightsaber.
Ray Park.
And as soon as that we saw it in animation, you're like, I've seen that. I've seen that in real life. I've seen the dude that did it. And when they showed that 4.5 minute clip, you can find it on YouTube. And it's them in, suits. And so Lauren Mary Kim's doing the drop and catching the lightsaber on the other side to catch it in, the slide on her knees. And so to see that, that's a little tease of that animated thing that Jeff's talking about. But like, there's so much depth, and I would love, you're right, whether it's just D in a booth for 45 minutes or even going into, the old Walt Disney stuff that we saw over the years with the Disney animated classics, and seeing animators at their desk showing you cells as they're flipping between the layers. Well, I did this and I did that. Like, it's all computer now, but there's there's people behind it. And that's what makes it so good. And that's ultimately what makes the content so good. So there's definitely a story to be mined there as well. I agree.
For sure, for sure. Well, Clayton, we're getting to the top of the hour. You've been more than kind with your time. I really appreciate you hanging out with us. Before we let you go, though, we know that 2023 is the year of Star Wars. We thought 2022 was, but 2023 we have Mando coming out in a couple months, a month and a half, 2 months. We have Ahsoka, we have Skeleton Crew, we have Visions, we have a number of other things. Was it
Rest of Bad Batch.
Rest of Bad Batch, Jedi Tale? What if you could get access to it right this second? Give me it now. What's the thing you're waiting for?
Oh man, well, I'm dying to see. I'm dying to see Ahsoka. I can't wait to see what they do with that. That's probably top of my list. But I'm gonna shamelessly plug Star Wars Timelines is
Yes.
coming out in April. That is,
Yep.
I can tell you, it went to print in December and will be out in April. So very excited about that. But yeah, I think Ahsoka, and I am the Jude Law one. The name's escaping me. What is
Skeleton Crew.
Yep.
Yeah.
Skeleton Crew. Thank you. Yeah,
Yep.
that should be interesting because it's
Yeah.
about kids, but it's not a kids show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
It
sounds. Yeah.
It's so interesting that we know absolutely nothing about it other than
Nothing.
Jude Law and a logo, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
Right. Yeah.
so Clayton, what can you
And
tell?
I want to double. Oh, I was just to jump in real quick. I want to double plug for Clayton and Star Wars Timelines because
Yes,
when
where I was
that comes
going.
out, I'm absolutely going to get that. I will also say one of my bigger regrets from Celebration was not going through that author area and getting that kick-ass Timelines poster that they have.
Oh yes, the poster.
And going through and getting all of y'all to sign it because I saw several people that had it and I went, ooh, I didn't know I wanted that, but I did. So that regret is carrying me forward into being excited about getting a copy of Timelines for myself. So
Clayton,
I'm
for the
definitely
people who
looking
may
forward
not know about what Timelines is, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so this is a book coming from DK that I worked on with Cole Horton, Kristen Baver, all big names, Jason Fry, Amy Rekel, the five of us. And it basically takes, the entire, all eras, High Republic, to the sequel trilogy and beyond, and puts all of the Star Wars stories into one timeline. So we're talking movies, animated series, comics, novels, video games, you name it. It's all in there. Probably the hardest thing I have ever worked on in my life, but it looks really good, and I think people are going to really like it.
Excellent. And what's the release date on that for people?
April. I'm not sure the exact date in April, but it's now April. So at the printers now, I understand.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, Clayton, where can people follow you so they're certain to find out about all this information as it goes? And where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, I'm still on Twitter at Clayton_Sandell. Instagram, I'm trying to hit more often, which is just at Clayton Sandell. And then please watch us on Scripps News. You can get it free at scripsnews.com over the air. We're on all the streaming services. You can program your TV and get us on the antenna through the airwaves, like
through the antenna.
And,
you have to hold it. You got to put a little extra tinfoil on, and you can.
Right.
So,
that is right. Yeah.
Well, great. Chris, what's going on with Bro Axiom this week?
Well, we've got some. Let's see. I think they're taking off this week from shooting the poodoo, but on Sunday nights live 9 a.m. But let's see. We've got our Unrefined Bro Axiom shorts that we do, where we have 55 seconds to talk about whatever we want to within the Star Wars, the lexicon of Star Wars, and you have to do it before that Unrefined Bro Axiom explodes. So Claire, unfortunately, was the first one to fall victim to that this week. We have our Quick Shots of Bro Axiom, which is our Star Wars comics preview show. We've got Han and Chewie number 9 coming out this week, as well as Bounty Hunters from Ethan Sachs, and it's so good. I can't wait for people to see that one. Star Bros have a new episode coming out this week, and and Bro Axiom Gaming. I think Dan and Roke are doing more God of War for that one. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. So yeah,
awesome.
Hey
Great.
Chris, one more thing. There was some Darth Vader comic news this week.
The red, white, and black thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you need to throw in with that, and something you're excited about?
I just give me. Give me.
Again, it has Star Wars in the name.
Give me it.
Fair enough.
I can. Yeah.
It was like a stunning cover. That might be the one, Chris, that gets me to buy a comic book. That might be the one.
All right, we're gonna have a fight afterwards, guys. So
all right. Well, Clayton, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you for your thoughts and your feedback. Wishing you nothing but the best. Can't wait for Timelines. And Nick, may the force be with you.
Always.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Just one more round, friend, then homeward bound, friend. Don't forget me in your dreams. Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. The nights get shorter, it seems. Just one more rhyme, friend. Yes, it's a crime, friend. But you know time, friend. Time can fly. So it's good night, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.